Hey folks, it's Jim from the Movie Wine, and today I'm reviewing The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey Part 1. I'll say right off the bat that I'm giving this film a C. I'm recommending it to any casual or big fan of the world of J.R.R. Tolkien and his mythology. If you didn't like at all the Lord of the Rings trilogy, then I recommend passing on it. Now, I was looking forward to this film. It was on my most anticipated list, and like many others, I had been following its production since day one. I don't quite have the loving affection for the original trilogy like many do, but I do think they are some of the greatest cinematic achievements ever. I was excited at the prosperity of a Hobbit film, acknowledging that it might be nice to see this world again. Also, there was the reassurance that it would be something different in terms of tone and size. Then Guillermo del Toro, who I was writing a paper on around the time, was hired to direct the film. With his creature designs, del Toro is one of the most imaginative filmmakers out there. I thought that he would be the perfect guy and would deliver something fresh, while respectful and faithful. Sadly, MGM hit bankruptcy and del Toro was attached to other things. He soon left after dedicating so much time. Finally, Peter Jackson, who was only serving as a producer, gave in and took on the directing reins after less success with films like King Kong and The Lovely Bones. For many, it seemed only fitting that he would. To me, I thought it was the wrong move. He would bring his usual strengths, but arguably his weaknesses as well. So how was The Hobbit Part 1? Well, it's okay. I didn't hate it like some have, but I certainly didn't love it either. First, the pros. One, the performances across the board are pretty stellar, particularly Martin Freeman, who was great as Bilbo Baggins. Number two, the film is visually stunning. It doesn't look at all that different than what we have seen before, but in return that creates a level of continuity. I didn't see it in the 3D 48 frame format since I didn't hear the most positive things about it, and I wanted to enjoy the film as best I could, so I saw it in the 24 2D format. Will I see it again in the 48 3D format? As curious as I am, probably not. Why? Because I have no interest in watching the story again, if you can call it a story. Don't get me wrong, I like the movie. After all, I'm recommending it. Although even if I didn't like it, I'd understand why some might enjoy it. I see no reason not to see it if you like Tolkien's world. After all, it looks great, at least in the format I saw it on. In some cases, this was a losing situation for Jackson, as it was for George Lucas when he made the Star Wars prequels. Oh no, it's not nearly as bad as that, but Jackson has surrounded himself around too many yes men who don't question him. With the success of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, no one would argue against a three-part trilogy for one book. In fact, they were more likely to support it. I'll get to that a little later. Jackson is also trying to make a less epic story as epic as the trilogy that made his career. He should have accepted it for what it is, accepted its brevity. Some feel the film's strongest moments are the ones that are more heavy and where the stakes are higher, resembling that of the original trilogy. I actually disagree. I found the humor welcoming in combination with the songs, although the trilogy also had its moments of humor as well. Also, the film is too long. For a book split into three, it's difficult to imagine how Jackson will be able to make three whole films that probably clock around 3 hours each. But if there's anyone who can do it, though, it's definitely Jackson. Scenes that would normally be in the deleted scene segments have somehow been added to the overall film, hurting the pacing of the picture. There's too much padding, and saying that this film is self-indulgent is putting it lightly. It almost feels like Jackson is on autopilot, completely in love with everything they shot. Discipline is not his greatest strength. Also, for me, in this unstructured flick, Bilbo gets a bit lost in the mix. Thankfully, the focus nicely shifts back to him in the third act, where he's given a solid arc that I found to be actually quite moving. Too often, despite the amount of exposition and dialogue, some of the other characters feel underdeveloped and not particularly memorable. It's tough for me to recall certain names, though I guess the wizard Radagast the Brown makes an impression, but not necessarily a positive one. However, I didn't find him nearly as grating as some have found him. He actually had one of the better action beats, leading the orcs away from the group. Still, The Hobbit suffers from merely too much. From battles with CGI trolls, goblins, and orcs, sadly replacing extras with heavy makeup from the original trilogy, it tends to get a little bit redundant. Before this review goes on to be as long as The Hobbit, there's still plenty to like here. As opposed to what some say, this is not the Phantom Menace. That's absurd. Unlike Lucas, Jackson actually recaptures the magic at times. This isn't nearly as stilted or as dull as those prequels, in part due to Jackson's use of real locations rather than just green screen. Still, I came out only mildly enthusiastic about the next two films. This decision to split the book into three is not a treat for the fans, in my opinion. I mean, it might be, but it doesn't feel like it was intended as such. I'm not saying Jackson has become this calculated businessman that Lucas has, but this could have been one film, maybe two. 3 is merely a cynical cash grab, and I would think any fan of The Hobbit might be slightly disappointed with this picture. Throwing in other Tolkien material makes it feel less like an adaptation of the children's novel. A 300-page book isn't dense enough for a three-parter trilogy. People will react differently to this, however. Some Hobbit fans will dislike it, some Hobbit fans will love it, some casual moviegoers will be checking their watch, and some will find it entertaining enough, kind of like myself. To be fair, despite the slowness, particularly of the first hour, it was only the last 45 minutes where I was ready for it to wrap up. In the end, I thought it was fine, and a little of Gollum played brilliantly by Andy Serkis can go a long way as we see a scene more thrilling than any other scene in the flick. I just hope that Jackson never decides to redo the original trilogy and make each book adaptation a 5-parter. The Hobbit is like seeing old family members. You're happy to see them at first, but after they have overstayed their welcome, you're ready for them to leave. That's it from the Movie Rewind. Have a good day, folks. Until next time.
Far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old, the pines were old.